wondering if everybody's going to be able to get on because we had so many registrants. I'm really hoping.
You sound like Trump at his event, you know.
We have so many people.
Tremendous.
Yes, and yet, Kristen, the only people on are us right now, so
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the TikTok has got us. Sound like Trump at his event. What's up, everybody?
What's up?
We have so many.
Just chilling.
Okay. Let me just take a look here. We're live. We're recording. We're good. We've got attendees totally rolling on, and people saying hi. Like I said, Snap, you already have some fans. I love that.
I got fam, and my fam is not boule.
I love it.
My friends are here, my family is here, and they're ready to participate in this discussion. I mean, we're all craving this. We're all needing this.
I think we are all needing this. Yes, I think we all need a little guidance and the ability to bounce things off each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're almost to 7 o'clock. I like to wait. I'm a kind of a prompt person. The attendees are starting to pile up, which is great. We're excited to have them. My son wants to come in at the end and say hi to all of you, just so you know. He just wants to come in and wave at the very end of the panel.
If it gets too heated or whatever, just throw them on camera, because a kid always like soothes the room, right? It'll just be like, oh.
Yeah, he's just like, it's like the puppy. It's like Barack.
Oh, right. Or bring the puppy on. Oh.
Bring the puppy and Grayson out, and we're good.
For Mark's safety, we've got children and puppies.
Yep. All right, you guys, it is 7 o'clock. So I think we are going to get things started. So everyone, I want to welcome you. I'm Kristen Hurd. I'm the founder of the Visionary Collective. And tonight you are joining us for the first segment in a 3-part series called The Power of Listening, Creating Allies and Inspiring Advocacy. And we're really, really excited to have you all here. Tonight is actually part 1. We're calling it an unedited conversation on race and allyship. So something I want to share is here at the Visionary Collective, our mission is to change the world one meaningful, thought-provoking conversation at a time. And, you know, as a result, that brings us to today. And I'm really excited to introduce this panel to you. I could go on for 30 minutes about each of them, but we don't have that kind of time, so I had to pull some snippets. So Sneb, can you wave for us? This is Sneb Dorson. Sneb is from Brooklyn. She has worked in the ad agency world for the past 25 years, right? Working her way up the ranks into her current position as president of Link 9 for the Omnicom Health Company Group, correct? Is that right?
Health Group.
Health Group, sorry. So she is the first president in the organization, first Black president, and she is here because she wants to contribute to closing the gap and bridging and talking about the divide of the racial inequality. Then we have Malik Yoba. Give us a wave, Malik. He's chewing on something. Born in the South Bronx and raised in Harlem. You know, he's an accomplished actor with more than 80 film and television credits. And some of you may really know him. He was well known for starring in a role of Fox's police drama, New York Undercover, back in the 90s. And this was actually the first TV series in American television history that had 2 people of color in leading roles. So that was very groundbreaking. And so that was awesome. And Malik has been a community activist and an advocate for social change for decades as an educator, facilitator, and board member of several leadership programs for young people around the world. We want to welcome you to the panel, Malik. Thank you for joining us.
Can you rewrite my bio, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. You're great, right?
I like the way you did that.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Then we have David Boxenbaum. David, wave to us. So David, for over 25 years, is very accomplished, especially in the music industry. One of the things has notably done is he actually discovered Maroon 5 over 20 years ago. David also has his BA from John Hopkins University, an MBA from Columbia, and he's been a guest lecturer at the Harvard Business School, NYU, Drexel, and Hofstra University. And this awesome guy also volunteers with Defy Ventures, which is a non-for-profit organization that gives job and life skills through teaching entrepreneurship to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. Thank you for being here, David. And last but not least, Mark, give a wave.
Hello.
Mark is the current CEO of Cloudwater Brands and is the former co-founder and CEO of Onboard Technology Informatics, which I think you sold, right, Mark?
We
It's a
did,
self-funded
yes.
technology company, very cool. And now he actually does a lot of work with a number of nonprofits that focus on helping underserved children in New York. They do things like providing mentorship, they encourage education, teach work ethic responsibilities, help them develop a career path, all while focusing on diversity in the workplace. So Mark, thank you for joining us tonight. So
Pleasure.
I want to stop talking soon, but I want to set up the evening for everybody. You know, I want to tell everybody that the conversation that went around how this panel came about. I was actually introduced to Malik, and it was in the middle of all the chaos that was happening around George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, which was all very tragic. And I posed to him the question, if I gave you the mic for the Visionary Collective, what would you do with it? And he actually surprised me. He actually looked at me and he said, I'd give it back to you and I would ask you to have white men join us for the panel, which totally caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that at all, Malik. And, you know, his response when I asked him, why are we going to do this? You know, he went on to tell me that, you know, he's very focused on creating allyship. And allyship with white people, and knowing that he wanted to do this with white men. And he said that to make real change, we need white men to be behind us. You know, whether we like it or not, these guys run the country. And whether we like what they do or not, they do, you know, they're in charge. And, you know, we need them actually, the guys, the white men that want to be behind us need to get behind us and speak louder than we are. So that's what we did for tonight. And, you know, so what we did is pull together this powerhouse panel of 2 powerhouse white men, 2 powerhouse Black leaders, and here we are with this discussion. So for all the attendees, which are a lot, thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. You know, and I want to set some expectations for the audience and the panel on tonight's discussion. You know, our goal is simple, but it's definitely not easy. Our goal is that we want to help you bridge the gap when you're talking with someone who doesn't agree with you about race relations in this country. Now, we do want everyone to know that we are very well aware that we will not solve this problem tonight. This is a very complicated problem, but what we want to do is we can contribute to the solution and not the problem. And so that is why we are here. So, and I also want to note that tonight, everybody's going to have different experiences. They're going to have different opinions, and that is okay. We want people to bring those different experiences and opinions to the table. And despite differences, I think we probably could agree on all agree on one thing, and that is we do not want to be where we are in this country right now, which is completely divided and not moving forward in a way we need to. We need to get to a place where we, meaning non-Black people, have a better understanding of the systemic racism Black people face. And our hope is also that the Black community will give us a chance to be allies. I think that's very important in bringing the 2 pieces together. So for those of you listening, there will be a live Q&A towards the end. We encourage all questions, but we also want to make it very clear that this is meant to be a safe and respectful platform, but still asking tough questions. So I'm going to start right away and start with kind of a tough question. Malik, I'm putting you up first, okay? You know, I've heard from many white people, many of my friends and people that I know that have had this discussion about race. They say, you know, we want to be allies and we agree that things definitely have to change, but like, and we want to support our Black brothers and sisters in the efforts to create equality and change. But, you know, but on the other side, we also disagree with the looting, the destruction of small businesses, some of the, you know, the violence. And people are kind of feeling like they have to choose one or the other. And they want to support the change for the Black friends, but they don't agree with this stuff. So, you know, can I throw that out to you, Malik, just to kind of open up the topic of and thoughts about this kind of angle people have in the world right now?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining me for dinner. Um, Italian wedding soup.
I love you, man.
I've been thinking about croissants all day, so I'm having a French croissant.
Love it.
And I got a little Italian beverage over here. Because Black folks, you know, we're always consuming whiteness, whether it be European in our food, in our fashion, in our cars we drive. And so we're surrounded by whiteness all the time. It's just part of everywhere we look in the world, right? The question around looting, no one has stolen more than white men on this planet. No one has stolen more property, countries, people, businesses than white men. And so I'm glad to see my brothers on this call. I know these are very thoughtful individuals that can spark all kinds of conversations from their perspectives on the world. My father was never in a position to have this conversation. He was born in 1927. He got his tooth knocked out by a cop when he was 11 years old, you know, in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. So I grew up with these stories of police brutality from my father as a child. His grandfather was a slave. And so, you know, stolen property, 400 years of stolen property. The problem with America and white men in general, not particular to these gentlemen, and I would assume people who have joined the choir or already part of the choir, that's why they're on this call. Emotional intelligence is everything. The ability to be empathetic, the ability to see yourself in other people. That is what is lacking in the teaching of that, how important that is from school-age children. That should be in the history books. It should be in fairy tales, you know, which should be rooted in hard truths, but in a sexy kind of cool way that young folks can understand. So it brings up a lot for me when we talk about that, because I hear this a lot. Like, yeah, we like the protesting, you know, we don't mind that, but what about the violence and what about the looting? Well, all Black leaders were shot by white men. Fred Hampton, 21 years old in Chicago. Come on, you know, Malcolm, yeah, those are Black men that were put up to the, you know, it's always been divide and conquer among Black folks. They were motivated by white man's initiative. And so what comes up for me is radical honesty. And I wish that we could be radically honest, but also kind, which is hard because we're all carrying trauma and we're triggered. So people don't want to deal with their vulnerabilities and their insecurities based on their perspectives. So that's why I asked my friend since 12 years old to come and join us on this call, Mark Seiden. You know, like we met as kids. We got to be in a band together. I went to his bar mitzvah. You know, we had sleepovers. We played hockey together. We played baseball together, basketball together. You know, we were just two young people dealing with each other. And as men, you know, we've been in therapy. We have deep, thoughtful conversations about the truth. And the funny thing is, Mark and I never even talked about race or allyship until the recent events that tore the country apart, which is interesting because we've known each other for literally 40 years, 41.
I thought it was 20.
That too. But if you add those together, you'll get to 41. CEO my ass, goddamn. So I will pass the mic. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, no, I thank you, Malik. You know, it's interesting when you said about, you know, white men have taken everything. You know, this discussion forced me, which in a good way, to do a lot of research, and I wanted to understand more about systemic racism. And I uncovered this lecture from a professor from Texas A&M, which was brilliant, and it really put in perspective one fact for me about the lack of opportunity I feel now understanding what Black people have had. We've had 20 generations in this country. 18 of those generations, Black people were denied basic rights, basic ownership of land, basic living, majority of it being enslaved. And it's unbelievable the conversation people can have around, you know, what they think Black people are trying to take now. It just shows a lack of understanding, and people are buying into propaganda. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That was, you know, helped me understand more what I need to learn more. So, you know, Snev, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Malik said, and, you know, kind of your experience. We've talked a little bit about you. You know, would love to follow up with your thoughts as a Black woman in this country. Well, you're muted.
We missed half of it already.
Yeah, you already started talking. And
okay, well, I will speak as a Black woman, and I speak as a sister and an aunt. Most of my focus, most of my life's focus, the way that I navigate the world, my fears, my hopes and desires are around that. It really is around how to make this world more just and more equitable for the ones that are coming up after me. In regards to, you know, just to touch on the looting for a minute, you know, when I think about how that is portrayed and the sort of rage, if you call it that, that is expressed around the looting, it feels very disconnected to me. It feels like it's coming from a very different reality. And that if the people who are looking at the loss of Target would stop for a moment and recognize that the anger, the rage reaction is coming from loss of life, then I think that we could stop and have a real conversation around why that is happening, what are the triggers, and why protest or a desire to be heard goes from kneeling to this.
Yeah.
I mean, my story is that I'm born in Haiti. I grew up here in the States. My parents, not unlike their Black parents who wanted well for their kids, who thought about how they will thrive and be successful in what is always an unjust, unequal school system, unequal police and security, unequal career and job opportunities. So what they did was instill in us to not deal with race. We were to push through it. And there's a lot of talk today about people who don't see color. And I find myself really focused on that, checking myself on that first. Because yeah, it was, if you go in the workplace, if you don't get that job, you know, I had a recruiter early in my career change my name on my resume to Stephanie.
Wow.
Because she thought, because instead of doing her job and selling my skills, it was easier to try and sell what she thought were white traits.
Right. Which is, yeah. Aren't you supposed to, I mean, Snev, shouldn't you just conform? I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, you know, it was her way of helping me fit in, right, versus saying to the organization, young lady, unlike anyone in your organization, she's going to bring it.
Yeah.
And that would have been advocacy.
Right.
But, you know, and then again, by the sheer grace of strength and courage, I walked out of that office. But you know, that's early on. And then when we start to talk about allyship, I remember my very first job, one of my very first jobs, I was let's call it a junior intern, and I'm sent to Tiffany & Co. to pick up a gift for a client, and I am followed throughout the store.
Right.
I get back to the company. I was working at a company called Bozell. Fergus O'Daly was the CEO of Poppy Tyson that I worked there. And he marched me back there. He marched back there and he expressed to them in clear language that that was no way to treat a human being. And so I've had these episodes and experiences in my life where I have had that other, you know, the other side of people not recognizing, not wanting to encourage, and then the recognition that there are people out there who will help create opportunity, who will help, who will call out,
right,
the things that are wrong and unjust, and educate in real time.
Right. Okay, and so those, you know, that's really powerful stuff. You know, especially people making assumptions about you, or, you know, assuming that they have to present you as white on a resume versus who you are. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. You know, David and Mark, you know, as white men, you know, navigating in this world, I'm sure you have run into other white people who have said these things to you, and maybe you've been in awkward positions, put in awkward positions. What is your experience with this kind of conversation?
Well, are you asking about workplace, or, I mean,
well, just the overall, you know, how do you separate the violence and the,
yeah, right.
and the supporting, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to say, and, you know, listening very attentively to Snev and Malik, and, you know, Malik and I do have a long history, and there's a lot of stuff that, you know, we could talk about, but I think, and Kristen, you and I talked about a little bit about this offline, is, you know, we've been put in a world where you're on one side or the other, right? And if we zoom out from race and we look at, you know, politics, or we look at Me Too, or we look at the NRA, you're either for it, you're against it, right? And if you say one thing that doesn't coincide with Me Too, you're against it. And so you have to choose these sides, and there's no middle ground. And that's where these conversations are supposed to take place, somewhere in between, right? And it pits side to side, and it doesn't give a dynamic where, you know, we can meet in the middle. And I think the most awkward things I feel are the awkwardness that the people I speak to, because I always define, you have your outright racists, which are, you know, are easy to identify. Then you have the people who grew up with Archie Bunker as the grandfather and said all this crap, and you find yourself repeating it just because you heard it. And then you have a lot of concerned people that just are taking in bits and bytes from the media and all, you know, all these different places to form their own opinion, because they really don't have their own, right? And there's no safe place for them to go to sit and have a conversation like that. To me, that's the most awkward, right? And I'm not deflecting the conversation, but it lends itself to things that I see and read. And I started to get really involved in social and make comments, and I just found myself pushing a boulder uphill, trying to get through to people, because there wasn't enough in my text or what I could say to zoom out and have a conversation, right? Or to have Snev's point of view to be able to articulate, you know, with credibility, so that you're just on one side or the other. And so I find myself most uncomfortable, you know, about that. And some of the other things which I don't know enough to speak of, I sit back and I listen and I learn, right? And so it's been an interesting, you know, like you said, you know, you did a lot of research. I have my best friend from childhood that I just started to talk to more deeply and profoundly about this stuff. And you know, I think that's the first greatest step, is to find an ally, a mentor, somebody that you can speak to in a safe place and work some of these things out, not from the media, not, you know, this stuff in the streets will end, and hopefully it ends because, you know, what we're gunning for here, you know, starts to change and there's real change. But that'll be a momentary point in history, and all these other things we're doing now will define us for much longer than that. And that's kind of unity, communication, and really bringing these things, you know, to a better light to talk about. And so hopefully I'm answering your question, but
no, I think,
you know,
you're making great points. I mean, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, and I've experienced the same thing, which actually will lead to another question I'll have for both Malik and Snev, is, you know, it's not my experience, but I want to change people's mind. And even further, sometimes I'm afraid to say the wrong thing too, because it's not my experience, right? And I'm not allowed to make mistakes in trying to educate people or educate myself. So, you know, it is a bit of an uphill battle. And, you know, forget social media or anything like that. You're not changing anyone's mind on there, right?
Right.
So, you know, it's astounding what people don't want to learn at times.
Yeah, and one last point, I want David to, you know, have some time, but, you know, in some of these conversations, people start to rattle off statistics, right? And they're like, well, this percentage is actually greater than this, and blacks kill blacks more than this, and they
Yes.
take this somewhat education and they formulate this opinion totally blind to what we're talking about. And, you know, I told the story the other night, Malik, I don't know if you had left or not, but I said, let's take away the violence and the shooting. Not that it's not important, but let's look at something else, right? Because they're rattling off about, you know, death rates and things like this. I go into a bar with a very prominent and a successful black guy who's my friend. We order a drink, right? The bartender turns his back and Dan puts his platinum card on the bar. The bartender comes back, not knowing who put it down, ran the credit card and walked up to me and handed me the credit card. And Dan said, what, a black guy can't have a platinum card? And his face, this white guy I was telling this to was like, huh. And I'm like, there are millions of stories like this that happen every second, everywhere. All the stuff we're talking about is polarized in the media, and it's to an extreme, and it's important. But there's so many of these little things that wrap up into what some of the messaging, at least I take and I've seen, need to really get talked about. And Malik, you said empathy. Find some empathy for what it's like to have a different color skin and be a black person in this world and experience that, because you never have, right? I got the platinum card. It wasn't even mine because I was white, right? And that's where the conversation of white privilege comes in, which is a whole other thing that people just don't understand. And we could talk about that another time. But thanks for asking the question.
No, that's great. It's like an unconscious bias, right? Because we're so programmed by, you know, by the media and the sound bites and the bullshit and the stories that.
Right.
You know,
and when you see
so
a friend,
it becomes hard, you know, if our goal here is to help people have a conversation and bridge a gap with somebody who doesn't even want to look at it, like, you know, we need to be open and understand like what we're kind of up against. So David Boxenbaum, I'd love to hear, I'm going to unmute you. I'd love to hear what you have to say on this. You unmuted?
I have to apologize. I'm getting a very spotty connection, so I missed about half of your question.
Oh, no, that's okay. So we were just talking about with, it's going back to what I asked Malik.
Freezing or the
Can you hear it okay?
Because I was having a problem.
Are you, see, he's freezing a bit there too.
But Malik?
Yeah, about what Malik said, just, you know, separating the violence out. As, you know, as a white man, you know, you have probably been in positions where it's awkward, like you're an ally and you hear people say things that are ignorant or they don't understand, or they grab onto, well, the violence, I want to help black, oh, I'm not racist, I like black people, but the violence, you know, and, you know, where, from a white perspective, like what is the conversations you've had around this?
Okay, the last part.
David's freezing up a bit.
And I'm just, it just keeps freezing. And I really.
Okay, so David will.
And I still haven't gotten on.
Okay, well, you know what I'll do is we'll circle back to you and see if you can fix that just a little bit, because I do have a question for you in just a little bit, and I would love to hear your thoughts, but I'm just going to kind of keep moving just out of, okay. And so Malik and Snev, if I can bring this question back to you, and we kind of touched on it with Mark, you know, people want to be allies, but they're afraid to offend people by asking questions. Like there's the pink elephant in the room, maybe around asking a question about understanding race or understanding what's important to Black people. And people are afraid to ask questions. It's like this whole cancel culture, right? And, you know, I always say the cancel culture is good for people who deserve it, people who act egregious, but you don't cancel people because there's a soundbite pulled out of something when they were actually trying to educate themselves or educate others. And so we have to be very careful in this world, supposedly, but like, let's, you know, what would you say to people? Ask the questions. What are your thoughts?
Nev?
Don't ask me about my hair.
Don't ask me about your hair.
Are you a natural
Everything
blonde?
else-
You're not a natural blonde? Is that a question? I'm sorry.
Everything else we can talk about. I think we remove the fear. If you're coming at this, and especially with what's going on right now, right? There is this acknowledgement, there is this interest. Malik and Mark have been friends forever. My closest friends are not Black. And these are people who love me, people who I love. They are my ICE and my phone. They're my ride or dies. But we've never talked about race. We've never talked about allyship. We've never talked about our experience. We've never talked about the Black men being killed by police. We've never talked about the young Black men who can't wear their hoodies. We've never talked about the fear that I have about my nephews and my brothers. We've never talked about that.
And do you think they're afraid to offend you?
Well, no, I think I personally, and I'm just speaking for myself, I think I lived, and my friends too, we lived in a false world of we don't see color.
Okay.
And because you don't see color, and I believe I read this in, I think it was White Privilege. If you don't see color, you don't see racism. And so, and therefore you're not tackling it. You're not addressing it. You're not, if we're in a restaurant and the waiter takes my platinum card and gives it to Jennifer Samuels, a conversation isn't had. I think we had mentioned unconscious bias. I'm a little tired of calling it unconscious.
Hey, go ahead. When you're done, I want to say something about that.
Because I do think with the work of educating and conversation and dialogue, we need to get to a place where if a platinum card is dropped on a bar and there are 3 people, where you just don't, what creates that? What assumes that?
Right.
So ask me, there was a while back, I found myself trapped into this campaign of, I'm sick and tired, don't talk to me. I'm not here to teach white people about race or racism, and I'm not here. Well, I'm here to talk. If you are open, if you are reaching out and you want to have the conversation and you want to acknowledge and recognize that by the sheer color of your skin, you have been afforded some privileges and opportunities in society, and you're ready to talk about my experience, then I'm here to talk.
Right. And so this is about people being brutally honest with themselves and being honest about that, you're sick of hearing the unconscious. Right. Okay. Malik, what are your thoughts?
I'm proud of you, Snev. You've shared this offline, the last few months with me, about this being the first time in your life. And so that where you're choosing to have these engaging conversations about these issues. So good for you. I think it's important. And it's interesting because I think the question was, are these conversations not happening because your white friends are nervous about asking the question? But the reality is you and your white friends reflected that same sentiment, we don't need to go there. My last name Yoba means last of the slaves, a new generation. My father made it up. And, he was born with a name, Milton Myers, which sounded very Jewish. And so, he'd show up for work as a musician and they thought some Jewish cat is showing up for the gig and he wouldn't get the gig. So I can't help but separate myself from these conversations. Yet, to your point, like the point with Mark and I, we didn't have the conversations, but this has been my life's work, like working in, back in the day, it was called cultural or multicultural, youth organizations. And our whole mission, in the 80s was to bring people together across every conceivable background so that we can work together, so that we could do what I was already doing in my life with people like Mark since I was a kid. And I just was, I was just a curious person growing up. I think science, some article I read once said, when kids reach the age of 12, they stop being as curious. If you've raised kids, that point where your kids no longer like, what does this mean? They do it to a degree, but people become much more aware of other people's discomfort or their own discomfort. And so that prevents them from, stepping into tough conversations. So I think that for those of us that are bold and fearless and will always have the conversations in every, in every kind of scenario, I think we have to be a little more empathetic for those that are uncomfortable having those conversations. And I think for me, I've just figured out slick ways of bringing stuff up to people without, sometimes they get uncomfortable. I'm cool with that too. Like I'll deliberately say some shit to make somebody uncomfortable. But other times, you just figure out other ways of speaking their language. And I think through all of this, it's important that we meet people where they are.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the hardest thing for all of us to do.
That's such a great point, Malik.
Yeah, I struggle with that, even now, because it happens in all aspects of our life, right? We all have different experiences, and but I think most importantly, I'm glad we're having this conversation tonight, and hopefully something clicks for somebody who's listening, or they can grab something and share with somebody else somewhere. To your point, this isn't going to be solved in a conversation tonight, but the more we can do this, the better off we'll be.
Yes, and and I know that as far as the panel, the people who are in the audience, we have everybody from New York City to Michigan to California. We have teenagers on this, we have adults. So to me, everything you guys are saying is something that needs to be said. And we need to, I love that phrase, meet people where they are, because you can't push someone and force somebody to see something that they're not ready to see, but you can ask them questions and help them get there, right? So, David, are you still freezing? David Boxenbaum, are you still freezing on us? He is.
It comes and goes. So let's try and get the question. I'll try to answer.
If you want to, I'll try and get the question. If you want to call into the line too, so you can hear it and answer it, that might work well. There's a phone number on the invite I sent you. We'll be able to hear you, just so you know.
That because I'm just having real technical problems, and I don't want to miss this. So give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna.
Okay, yeah, and then we'll keep.
Right.
We'll just kind of.
If you don't mind, let me just take his 2 seconds. Snev, I wanted to respond to what you said. I think it's very important along the lines of what Malik said, and history of people who love each other. That happen to be black or white. And in this instance, we are now at a point where we can start to, connect deeper dots about our relationship and start to open that up. And Malik, I love what... maybe he should.
You gotta love David.
You gotta love him. Maybe you can mute him now. Is he off? So
sorry, I muted.
Okay, so
you might just have to use your phone, David.
Snev, this notion of not seeing color is a very interesting thing. I hear people see it all the time. I have a visceral reaction to it. I immediately advise them to see color. It's not about making somebody invisible, but there's so much meaning in terms of the invisible conversations that didn't take place, as you brought up, and even Malik and I didn't share things. But that didn't mean that I didn't see color and racism from an early age. And most of my life in philanthropy and what I did in the communities was inspired by an incident of racism.
And Mark just froze up too. Got a little bit of connection issues tonight, huh? A little bit.
A good old East Sag Harbor Wi-Fi. So I will just add on that I am having more meaningful conversations with my friends now, people I've known for over 20 years, now that we have all agreed that we see color, and that we have all, and as Malik, now that we all hear, I believe that my friends, my circle, the people that I love, I have watched them and they have watched me all come along, and we are at that place. For better, the murder of Mr. George Floyd changed me. I'm no longer the person that I was before that. I am no longer, I'm no longer passive. I'm no longer letting things slide. I am no longer friends with people who lean on the side of racism and giving them a pass and saying, oh, it's okay. Like I have been activated to talk and address and have conversations and really try and move and move things forward in every way of my life. Career, with the people, with my mentors and my mentees, and with my siblings, friends, and family. And it's not to say that some of that didn't exist before, but it is so much more pertinent and urgent now in moving forward.
I love that. That's great, Snev. David.
Yes.
I'll try and ask you your question now.
Yep, I am ready.
So we want to have a balanced look at this too. We want to come from both sides. David, we talked about how allyship needs to be a two-way street, right? So we want to support our Black brothers and sisters, but we've also run into maybe having, things done to us that we didn't expect, personally I've been called a white bitch a couple times, or, so David, can you tell me a little bit about the conversation we've had about your experience?
Yeah, so, I made an offhanded point to you that, and was that the only so as a Jew, I'm certainly aware of anti-Semitism. I feel lucky that I have not felt it overtly cause me problems the way that being a person of color, and I've seen it happen directly. But at the same token, as I said, the only time I've actually experienced overt anti-Semitism was from Black folks. And the point, we talk about allyship, the thing we were talking about is that it's, my role is, sometimes to first listen and not talk, but, to Black people in the movement, there's, and I say this more broadly, is like there's a platform where you're having an audience and, being kind of accountable for yourselves the same way that you're asking other folks to be held accountable. We talk about cancel culture. A lot of white executives were rightfully, quote unquote, canceled for either sexism or racism or whatever the bad acts they, conducted. And then I've seen, whereas prominent members of the BLM movement, and I just can speak to some celebrities just because they're very public, whether it's Nick Cannon or Ice Cube or Steven Jackson, who on one hand are saying and doing really good things for the movement, but on the same token are then expressing, in some cases, what I think is relatively meaningful anti-Semitism, and they're not being held to the same accountability as they're asking, everybody else to be held accountable. And I think as, and I've attended some BLM, rallies, and there was definitely some formal anti-Semitism going on, in terms of signs being held. And, for me, it hasn't prevented me from being involved, because I don't say that as a blanket statement about the movement. It's more of a general statement about, it's really kind of about leadership, and when you have, when you want to create change and you want other people to change, you have to also kind of exemplify. And ironically, I'll make my father briefly served in the military, and one of the great management lessons he learned from the military, which kind of the opposite of people think, is in the military, you lead from the front, meaning, if you're an officer, you go into battle first, meaning you lead by example. You're like, I'm not going to ask my soldiers to do anything that I wouldn't do. And I think it's important that when you're asking for meaningful change, call me crazy. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, you know what, if I'm concerned about other people's, forget about, more covert bias. If I want people to change their behavior on what is seen as overt bias, I have to be accountable, because it starts to feel, candidly, a little bit hypocritical.
Okay. All right. That's an observation that I would definitely love to have a conversation about. Mark, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, because we talked about some stuff that you've experienced and how allyship does need to be a two-way street.
Yeah, I don't have as much profound, I grew up in New York City. I'm a non-practicing Jewish kid, but I'm Jewish, and I hung out with a bunch of the bad kids in the neighborhood, Irish Catholics and Italian guys, and my nickname was Jew. And Malik, you remember JT? His nickname was Chocolate, right? And so it was just thrown out there in general, that wasn't a more of a black-white thing. And I haven't had David's experience in the Black community facing anti-racism, but I think from a point of sensitivity, from my perspective and allyship, I do hear a lot, and we talk about generalizations and so forth. I do hear a lot of you white people. I moved into a predominantly African-American neighborhood in Sag Harbor. It's now changing over and it's mixed. But I was met with a lot of resistance from the neighbors, even though I consciously moved into this neighborhood to be a positive member, of the community, and talking to some of the neighbors, that was some of the rhetoric. And I didn't have a Black Allies T-shirt on. I didn't have an Ice Hockey in Harlem T-shirt on. I wasn't like, hey, dropping names and dropping, hey, Malik Yoba's my best friend or whatever. And it wasn't that they were, I felt immediately like they didn't like me, but there was this generalization of, you white people. And I think as we form this allyship and grow it, and I think, Malik, I think you caught yourself before, as you made a very valid point, not represented the guys on this call tonight. I know that I have 5 people in my household who care deeply about this. I work with coaches at Ice Hockey in Harlem and Torch, and people who consciously joined these groups that were 95% of color. We walked in knowing exactly what we were doing. We never asked for a medal or any recognition. We just wanted to get into the communities and help. And we still don't want any recognition. But the only thing, I would like, and I want to speak on behalf of a lot of people who really give a big shit about this, is that we're not lumped in with, this big group called the white people. And I understand, I'm empathetic where it comes from. So this is not argumentative, but, I do want to express that, because I think that it's important that this does go both ways. And it goes back to the middle ground, the middle aisle that I don't think exists in this world. And until we find that, I don't think we make all the progress we want to, right? And I think it'll promote conversations, it'll promote sensitivity on both sides. And nobody should be making an excuse why, if on the other side of your statement or your action, you're hurting somebody that you care about. And I think that's where we find our middle ground, and that's where I think we find our most productivity here.
Right. Okay. Yep. That's great comments and thoughts. Malik, Snev, can you take a couple minutes to comment on that? And then we're going to go to Q&A, because we've got a lot of great questions coming in.
Gentlemen first, Malik.
Okay. This is my natural hair, by the way. And you can touch it. No, there's a lot in all of that. You know, as I hear both gentlemen, David, I just got to meet, and who I do have affection for. I thought we had a great first chat a few weeks ago. And then you sent me a great film on Harry Chapin, which I really loved. And, you know, my insomnia enjoyed it too. Watched like 3 in the morning. And that was a great example of a guy who actually was an ally to everybody. He just was in the give a fuck business. Like, he focused on hunger and just said, you know, it's possible to care for people. And so I think white people should, and I'm going to say it in very general terms, Mark, white folks need to be uncomfortable because Black folks are uncomfortable all the fucking time. And if you're going to be, you know, not you specifically, but anyone, I think that, you know, to be able to endure being followed in the store, having women grab their purses when you pass by, taxis not stopping for you, you know, the credit card thing, the teachers trying to put you in special ed because they think that you're just a dumb Black kid, like all the shit that we have to endure every single day. And, you know, I feel fortunate because I was just blessed with a really big heart as a kid. My mother told me when my parents were separating at 10, she didn't tell me what was going on because I would have tried to fix it. I just always saw possibility, and I believed that the world was mine, right? Growing up in Harlem, hanging out with kids like Mark and other kids from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, you know, we had one friend whose grandfather was a GM, vice president at GM, and lived right there on Fifth Avenue at the Park 5. And I remember going to this kid's house, the grandfather's house. You know, the elevator opens onto the apartment, overlooking Central Park, white rug, white grand piano. His office was on the 50-something floor. You could see all of Central Park. In my head as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, I just felt like this is where I'm going. Like, I'm connected to these people because this is my life. Like, this is a reflection of who I am. And I'm fortunate that even though I had a very, my father was a Black nationalist. He wanted us to move to Africa upon graduation of high school. We didn't have television in the house because he didn't want white folks to teach us how to think. We had lots of books on the Black experience. And he was very much that person that always had that conversation about the importance of understanding your identity, your role in the matrix, and how you have to contribute. I saw his pain too. I didn't feel his pain because I had friends like Mark. So that was interesting as a kid, right? And I was raised Muslim. And I was told that, you know, my father was not a Nation of Islam Muslim. He was a Sunni Muslim that made Hajj twice in Mecca. And, you know, we went to mosque with a lot of people, mostly Middle Easterners and Africans, but folks from around the world, Europe in some cases, you know. And so I feel fortunate that in some ways I've been able to see above the fray, as it were, in general, no matter what it is. Right? You can walk with peasants and kings, drug dealers, prostitutes, the Pope, the president, like see all of it. And I've had those experiences in life to see like the humanity in everyone. So I've committed my life to making sure that I can help teach that, whether it's in a song, a play, a movie, a TV show, you know, a small gesture, you know, in the street, whatever it is, you know. And you want people to feel that freedom, to not have to, those white people, and really feel the pain of that. And like, white folks, here they go. Like, I don't carry that. And, you know, the flip side in terms of accountability of Black people, we could be the absolute fucking worst. Because we'll talk about, we want freedom, but I see and hear racist, dumb, homophobic, sexist bullshit from Black folks too. And so, you know, I also make that my mission too. Like, yo, that ain't cool. That's fucked up. You know, last year I made a comment, just keeping it really, really real. You know, I made a comment in support of the trans community online. And the comment actually, and Black folks let me have it. Like, it was crazy. Like, people wanted to assassinate your character. It wasn't white people that did that. And that was incredibly traumatic for me as a Black person, because it's love everybody, but definitely love Black folks first, because I have to love my own reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about putting somebody else to the side, but if I don't love what I see in me reflected in you, dude with your pants hanging down, sagging, you know, young teen mother, people living in the projects, you know what I mean? So that's why I've chosen the path I've chosen, you know, to be an activist, be an artist. And I think as artists, you know, as Paul Robeson said, artists are the gatekeepers of truth. And I take that role seriously. So, you know, I just want to, you know, to your point, David, I think it's about, I don't think we want to be exemplary, but I don't think that's a prerequisite because we're all going to fuck up. You know, we talked online and offline on our call about, say, someone like Farrakhan, and to Mark's point about the middle road. As a Black person, if I mention my support of Farrakhan, my Jewish friends, or some of them, lose their mind and call me an anti-Semitic, you know, and call me anti-Semitic because of the things that Farrakhan says. But he has also done a lot of good. And I've had conversations with this man, you know, so it's like, I see his flaws and I can call him on his flaws, but I also need to celebrate the things that he does that make sense and meet in the middle. And I should not be held or called anti-Semitic because I support a man that may not be exemplary in someone else's eyes. And that's the middle ground that Mark is talking about. We're all flawed humans. The earth is a learning environment. And the cancel culture piece, well, fuck you, you support that man, I can't fuck with you anymore. That doesn't help us.
Right. So, you know, Malik, you make a lot of good points and things that I could definitely respond to. And Snev, I want to hear what you have to say, but we also want to, we're getting into, it's almost 5 to 8, and this has gone very, very fast.
There are some really great questions.
There's some really good questions. I'm going to read this one that my producer forwarded to me. This is, have you ever had a conversation with someone who initially was an opponent, denier of white privilege, and who after the conversation made a visible transition to accepting allyship? And if so, what did it take? And what was the trigger that got them to get it? Do you ever have that moment, the aha moment with someone?
Can I speak as a white person who had that conversation? Yes. Yeah. So this is one of these conversations where, you know, George Floyd was a criminal and he was this, and, you know, Blacks are killing more Blacks in the neighborhoods and blah, blah, blah. And we had a 2-hour discussion on, you know, going back to, you know, when slavery ended and what that really meant and what happened to Blacks, you know, after, and then all these generations. And I said, do you realize that this, you know, the Supreme Court had to grant Black people their civil rights, right? I mean, a court had to give them rights. And it was jaw-dropping to see the reaction because, again, to the media and where this person picked up all this information was just bits and bytes and then sewn together into what they thought was a cohesive, you know, place for them. And I knew it was paper thin because they were just saying it too. When somebody really means something, they say it, you know, there's spit, there's, you know, animation. They were just rattling it off like as to, I'm taking, this is my position. And the conversation ended, oh my God, thank you. I feel, or I feel, you know, whatever. And I said, feel like that. Just keep educating yourself. We've been in touch on a regular basis about the topic. Am I breaking up?
Yes, we're losing you a little bit. Yes, but I think we got most of it. And I think, you know, being the point that people were taking the wrong pieces and putting it together and creating their own narrative, and you were able to bring that back. So does anybody else want to comment on that? Because there are a bunch of good questions.
Just quickly comment that, sorry, David, you go.
No, it would be ironic. Ironic that the two white folks monopolize this question. So
oh, no, but
if there's room for me, great, but Steph, please go.
I'm just glad you're online. I love that Mark jumped on that answer, because I think what's critical and important is that all Black people have spent their lives trying to convince people otherwise, right? We talked going into this that we know many of the people that are signing on here are allies. They're people who already think the way that we do. So let's hope that we are able to reach those who are not there yet, as you know, as we say, who are not ready to meet us where we are. And so I think that is allyship in action. It's because we know where a lot of the seeds are. It's not necessarily when a Black person is present. This thing grows when white people convene together. And there are things that are said that sometimes are not said to us, but I think many of the opportunities to educate and inform are present in the white person to white person, or forget color, or you know what I mean, objective person to objective person.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, to the point being that, and I'm seeing the questions going back to kind of, if we can give people ideas, philosophies, and talking points about how to bridge a gap of somebody who doesn't understand, you know, I mean, starting first with meet people where they are. You can't force someone to go where they're not ready to go yet. And it's through education and talking, you know, it's helping people understand. It's, you know, it's never going to happen on social media, but Snev, you make a great point. It's worse with two white people together, right? I've seen it myself growing up in middle America. Another question that I'm seeing here is, okay, what advice do you have for the allies who live every day with the privileges of whiteness or passing or growing up in normative culture and who want to help? I think, I'm just reading some of these. We've kind of, I think that hopefully we've kind of answered that question. I'm hoping. Yes, David.
As someone who grew up in a very white, privileged background, who, you know, the first, you know, the thing that, and I really didn't really interact with the Black community until I was in college, and not even in my college, because I did political work in the city of Baltimore. And the first thing and this is something that doesn't come naturally to me, which is the first thing I do is I just shut up and listen, you know, and trying to, you know, spend time with folks and not insert my kind of annoying curiosity, and just allow myself to listen and allow people to be comfortable and try to kind of not walk in their shoes, but just see them living their lives in a way that is authentic. And you know, when you start to in your mind see patterns or see things like, oh, I'm starting to really see what's happening, and I'm starting to really understand, because I didn't understand, you know, growing up in Western, I didn't know anything. I knew a few Black folk, but it was few and far between. And when I was in Baltimore, I started to really see the real Black experience and understand for the first time really what white privilege is, seeing the lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to education, lack of access to a fair judicial system. And I grew up, you know, in a relatively privileged environment where I was taught to believe, you know, you can accomplish whatever you want as long as you work hard and kind of do the right thing. And when it wasn't until I got to college, I said, you know what, that's not true for everybody. And it happened not because I was seeking it out and probing, but I just chose to, I don't want to say immerse myself, but I engaged in the community in a way that wasn't disruptive or self-serving.
Right. And I think that's actually a great question. I mean, it just makes me think, like, I mean, as a white person growing up in middle America, again, like, you know, growing up in high school, grade school, you know, we were not exposed to other cultures, and there was certain language and there were certain things that happened that, you know, I can't believe I look back and it was just let go, but it fueled how people think and how they perceived the Black culture, you know, and it creates that unconscious bias that we were talking about. You know, I want to read this next question here because I think it's a good one. Looting versus allyship. Do you think the conversation is about not just what counts as acceptable reactions to unacceptable events, but also who decides? Does that make sense? I'll read that. What I see it. Looting versus allyship. Do you think the conversation is about not just what counts as acceptable reactions to unacceptable events, but also who decides what's acceptable? I think
that's an intellectual exercise that I'm not sure that, wow. With all due respect to the person who posed the question, I feel like there should be a follow-up question to that. I'm not sure, because we could spend time on that. I'm just curious what the value of that is. Like, we literally could like debate that and unpack it, but at the end of the day, it's like, get involved. Like, if you don't understand the looting, you don't understand the pain. Just like NFL didn't understand why Colin Kaepernick took a knee. We've been in pain. We've been traumatized, period, end of story. And so, again, we can't have a conversation about looting unless you're gonna talk about white men stealing everybody's shit all over the world, colonizing you, changing your language, giving you names, giving you religion, putting his image on the Jesus, which according to the Bible has curly hair and dark skin. And so unless we're gonna have a conversation about looting in the full context of who stole what and how much, we're wasting our time. And then beyond having that conversation, what are we going to do about it? Because I do believe we deserve reparations. There's, you know, and truth and reconciliation, which has happened around the world. Like Citibank, it's ironic, I bank with Citibank, but Citibank, you know, JP Morgan, all of these, Barclays, all of these institutions, you know, Lloyd's of London, were all founded on the backs of looting, you know, profits of looting. And so we can't have just talk about someone who stole from Target or an AutoZone or burnt it down, because, you know, Black Wall Street was burnt down by white people in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 20s. And so we have to be able to have those conversations parallel. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
In looting, I hope to not spend a lot of time on looting, because I think looting is being used to avoid
the real issue.
Yes. And that was actually.
If we're talking about looting, seriously, simplest form, after a hockey championship, the fans go out, they make noise, they loot. That's called a celebration. So, like, let's move looting. I hope we can move looting out of, until we are able to define what is it about the looting that really pains us and brings it up in discussion. I hope we are able to move it. I mean, I think allyship was part of was part of the question.
Okay, all right, and I'm gonna do one more question.
One thing about looting real quick is I agree with everything Malik says. I think the problem with looting is not even judging whether there's a morality church, is that there are a lot of people in power. You know, everybody on this call and probably everybody listening has a tremendous amount of empathy. The problem is that looting turns into the headline and diminishes everything else that the movement does. And what it does is the folks who are probably there's some people who are not going to be supportive and use an excuse. Put them aside. There are folks who are on the sidelines or maybe on the fence, like maybe there is really something to this, and they're using that as either as an excuse, or the media or the forces that be are propping that up to diminish everything else, and it's crowding everything else. So even if looting is completely justified, the problem is being used against the movement. And so the challenge is we can talk. It's a very intelligent, thoughtful conversation, what Malik is getting at. But the problem is, by other forces, use the club to hammer down the movement, saying this is all a bunch of criminals, this is not valid, and they're using it as, like I said, it's like a bully pulpit. So my perspective,
it's a total distraction. Yeah,
absolutely. It's also the easiest way to keep us divided, right? Within the looting are strategic insertions of groups that do this under the guise of another group. Let's say it's the white supremacists, and they spray BLM everywhere, and now there's divide and controversy, right? So not only does it diminish the movement, but it keeps everybody divided, and that's what the media wants. And again, these are all things that we're seeing, you know, through the media. I mean, I was back in my old neighborhood, there was a lot of destruction, but again, that's going to pass. And if we focus on this, and that's what we do, get on the hamster wheel of this argument, who's looting, is it right, you know, versus allyship, I don't even think those two should be mentioned in the same sentence. I think that, you know, we're trying to rise above, you know, what's going on and try to form an allyship, which is, you know, if you look at the Middle East, you know, they keep going back and forth and saying, well, you stole this and you bombed this, and until somebody brokers peace and a conversation, it's going to keep going on, right? So we have to get away from, you know, following the media and continue with these conversations, getting tough subjects on the table, things that make us uncomfortable, Malik, things that are controversial, but we're all here to work out together in our safe place, right? And stay away from the media messages because they're not doing us any good.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, you said that very, very well. And in fact, we're going to start wrapping this. We're going to actually wrap this up. And everybody has had amazing, amazing thoughts, feedback. I cannot thank you enough. I think that what we've really established here overall is that there's still a lot of education that needs to happen. We need to listen more, and we need to ask questions. I mean, to the point that, you know, you, Mark, said is the media has made a mess of this. And we're, you know, when you look at the history of how Black people have been treated, and if we're 400 years old, right, and 83% of that time, people have not had an opportunity to actually build themselves and have opportunity. And there are groups committed to keeping those structures in place. Those same groups are very much committed into keeping us divided, 100%. And if we can put that stuff aside and keep forward with a message of equality and asking questions and patience, I think, you know, everybody who walks away from this call, I hope we've made a difference. Even if one person walks away from this call and can have a different conversation, again, to bridge that divide, we've done our job.
No, but it's not just putting it aside. It's the white folks screaming louder than the Black folks.
That's it. That's it,
83%. That's the part.
Yes.
Like it really, you know, working in film and television business, you know, I pitched a show a couple of years ago based on a historically Black college campus. And the writer wrote it as an all-Black cast. And I suggested we add one white character. And it's a blue blood New Englander who decides, you know, he's going to leave Harvard to go to an HBCU because he wants the Black experience. And my real subversive mission was to put words in that character's mouth that I would say, but I wanted them to come out of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid on national television. Of course, the networks we pitched it to didn't want to deal with that. Pitching a show right now that's based in the history of, you know, gator bait, Black babies being fed to alligators. That's where the term gator bait comes from, for the farming of alligators for their skins. And so, again, we can't push it aside. We got to put it in the right in the middle. and really drill down on that shit really loudly, but it can't come from Black folks.
Yep. We gotta be allies. And just for 1 second, my son wants to say hello to everybody.
Hello.
He's a big ally and make everybody smile. That's Grayson. He just wanted to say hi.
And I will just say, if the question is how can you be an ally? I think one of the easiest ways is to vote, so that we can hopefully get ourselves a leader who is not as divisive and is not undermining the human rights issues we have here.
Yep.
Vote for the leader that you think will bring the most unity to this country.
That's it.
Someone asked about policy change. It's not even policy change. It's just mentality. And
it's totally mentality.
Bring a policy of unity, and this country will start to heal from the top down, right?
Yes, that is very, very true. So, all right, I want to thank everybody tonight. For those of you who have joined us, again, we recover, recapping everything, talking about education, as white people speaking loud up for your Black brothers and sisters and having conversations, meeting people with, where they are. And I just want to take a quick moment to thank the new team members that we have here at the Visionary Collective. Eileen King, who is our executive producer, and our director of marketing, Alana Saab, and definitely have to thank my wife and my son, but my wife has been 100% behind this effort, and I'm super grateful for that.
My producer.
What? She's your producer, exactly. So thank you all for being here, and I do want to let you know, for tuning in, our next subject for this panel, this series is going to be on speaking to children about racism. And the third piece of the panel is going to be about the media and how they're committed to being divisive with race. So please watch. We'll be sending emails out soon for those dates. And again, thank you everybody for being here. Carry forward and bring peace, as they say.
So one last point.
Yes.
I just went through the questions really quick. So I guess if people want to ask direct questions, because I won't have access to some of the answer, being able to answer.
I screenshotted them.
DM me on Instagram at Malik Yoba.
Yep. Yes. And if anybody wants to see more information about them, you can find it on our website at visionc.com. So thank you, everybody, and have a great night.
And thank you, David and Mark. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really, Snev, was great meeting you. Malik, always great to see you. Mark, new friend.
Yeah.
Malik, it was great to watch you eat again.
Snev, let us know when you're cooking. We're coming over.
Great.
All right.
I know. You know that.
So.
Right.
All right, bye, guys.
Okay, thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.